Just before we dive back into the episode, I wanted to quickly share something that might interest you, especially if today's conversation has got you thinking about your own sustainability work. Some of the things we hear most in this industry are, I wish I could connect with other people doing this work, or I'd love to turn my sustainability expertise into something more. Well, 51 to Carbon Zero, the sponsor of this podcast, have created their own referral network. And it does exactly that. This isn't about selling you something, it's actually about helping you make money while building the sustainability community we all need. So here's what's in it for you. First, you get to join a genuine community of sustainability experts who share knowledge, refer work to each other, and solve problems together. So, no more working in isolation. Secondly, there's real money involved. There's 10% plus commission on software referrals. We're talking about projects that go from 30 grand up to 100 grand. Plus, you'll be able to boost your presence by taking part in our fireside chats. I've actually got an email in front of me from Louisa Stevens, one of the ambassadors, and it says that all her clients are genuinely happy because she's got a great partner and her clients love them. But here's the bigger picture. You'll be helping accelerate the sustainability transition that we all desperately need. Every referral, every connection, every collaboration moves us closer to the world we're all working towards. If this resonates with you and you want to earn some extra income, click the link in our show notes to become a 51 to Carbon Zero ambassador. Okay, back to the show. Welcome to another edition of Target 1.5. Target 1.5 is a mini-series from our podcast, a kind of audio guide with invaluable information and expertise to give you the confidence to start implementing sustainable practices, which will in turn help you play your part in limiting global heating to 1.5 degrees. In this series, we're meeting business leaders from 3 key industries: finance, law, and food and beverage. We'll be finding out how they've changed the way they do business to become more sustainable, and we hope they'll inspire you to do the same. I'm your host, Will Richardson, and with me is our in-house climate strategist, Emma Littlewood. Now, if you have a business in the food and beverage sector, we've put together an exciting case study that's right up your street. We'll be talking to Louisa Ziane, the co-founder of Toast Ale, a pioneering brewery which brews beers from surplus bread that would otherwise go to waste. Beer brewing is one of the most emissions-intense industries in the world, and Toast Ale is leading the way in this sector. And if you don't brew beer, a lot of their knowledge and experience can be applied to the food and beverage industry as a whole. So, how do Toast Ale reduce their emissions in a carbon-intensive industry? Over to you, Louisa.
To ensure that our business practices are sustainable, we are accountable to a board that has representation that's focused on our environmental mission. Tristram Stewart, who's one of the founders of Toast, sits on our board with exactly that hat on. So any key decisions that we make, key strategic decisions that we make need to go through the board, and not only are we as an operating business ensuring that the decisions that we make are sustainable, but also that we are fully challenged at the board level to ensure they are. As a B Corp, our articles of association have been changed to ensure that we are working for people and the planet, not just profit, which means that the directors have a fiduciary duty to ensure that happens. And so the board level accountability is really, really important. I think also the culture of the business is absolutely essential. The team itself are all very motivated by our environmental mission. It's what brought most people to us in the first place. And so we are all here to achieve that mission. Myself, I previously worked as a carbon accountant at the Carbon Trust, working on climate change policy for big business. And my co-founder, Rob Wilson, was leading an organisation called Ashoka, looking at how change makers can bring about social change as well as environmental change. So we are both very dedicated to the mission. There's very much a tactical, cultural and strategic control over our mission.
And that's exactly why we chose them to be in our case study for this episode. Toast Ale is the perfect example of an organisation that's proved you can still be a successful business with sustainability embedded in every level of your organisation, especially from the top down. Now, Emma, for organisations in the food and beverage industry, what can be achieved through top-level buy-in?
Top-level buy-in is really important in any industry. We found through working with clients that if we don't have top-level buy-in, we haven't got any purchase in various departments across the business. And what they've done at Toast Ale has really, really made a huge difference to what they're able to implement on the ground. And it's taking everyone with them. It's really impressive. And we do have experience of working with clients that don't have top-level buy-in. And it is making those challenges of reducing emissions and increasing sustainability much harder.
Right, okay. So let's see how this top-level buy-in has trickled down into Toast Ale systems. Packaging is obviously a huge part of the food and beverage industry. So let's hear how they've tackled that issue.
For us, our biggest sources of emissions are in our packaging and then in our production processes. For reducing our emissions then, which for us is key, we have set a target to be net zero by 2030, and we want to do that through reduction as far as possible. So to reduce our emissions, we have looked at our packaging and introduced new messaging for customers. Predominantly, we are using aluminium cans and glass bottles. We added aluminium cans just 2 years ago because aluminium has a smaller carbon footprint overall. There are benefits to glass and benefits to aluminium, but when we looked at the two together, we found that aluminium offered the best outcome from an environmental perspective. The key, though, is that those cans are recycled. The mining of bauxite, the virgin material for aluminium, is incredibly energy intensive. And so the more recycled materials we can keep in the system to prevent that aluminium, that valuable material being lost, the better. We can significantly reduce the impact of aluminium production through the circular economy, essentially by mining out less raw materials and keeping what we've already produced in the system. Aluminium is a great material because it's infinitely recyclable, and your can of beer could be part of an aircraft engine, and that aluminium can really be used for anything. So we introduced aluminium 2 years ago and have been communicating with customers about the relative benefits of it, but also the vital importance of recycling. For our own emissions, we've also been looking at packaging more broadly within our system and removed plastic from our packaging system. We used to have our glass bottles, for example, in a cardboard tray that was shrink wrapped with plastic. We've been able to remove that now from the process and move to fully recycled and recyclable FSC certified cardboard boxes. So there is still a lot that we need to do on packaging. We have also tried reuse systems. We introduced what we call growlers. They're about 4 pints of beer in a reusable glass container that people can refill at either a local tap room, or we worked with Waitrose as part of their Unpacked scheme, so people could take those containers to the Waitrose stores that were participating, refill the beer, enjoy it over the weekend, keep hold of that glass container, wash it, take it back to Waitrose, where it would be sterilised and refilled. So there's no packaging waste at all. That is the optimum. And we would love to see more of that way of working introduced in the system. Of course, the best really is to have no packaging at all. So for people looking to have the lowest impact personally on your packaging footprint would be to go to your local pub, have a pint in a glass that's hopefully been poured from a reusable keg or cask. And then there's no packaging involved at all. That also was key for us. Some breweries are using plastic kegs. So we work with a company called Kegstar that use steel kegs, and they collect those after they're emptied, clean, sterilise, return those to breweries to be refilled.
Now, packaging is a really important consideration for businesses in this industry. A significant amount of waste, energy, water, and emissions can be saved by reducing or changing packaging. Louisa, as you've just heard, has reviewed the impact of glass and aluminium, and there are pros and cons with both of these materials. Emma, how can a business in the food and beverage industry reduce their impact on the environment through packaging?
Yes, as we've just heard from Louisa, packaging is really complicated to get right because the starting point is always going to have to be you've got to have the appropriate material for your product. So, for example, in the food and beverage industry, packaging must comply with hygiene and safety rules and obviously must protect the contents from damage. And that's your bottom line. Balancing those requirements with carbon emissions and other environmental impacts requires knowledge of the raw materials, the manufacturing processes, and the reality about whether the packaging will truly be recycled. So while glass, for example, has a good recycling rate of over 70% in the UK, other materials like plastic packaging is much lower, at around 47%. Louisa explained how at Toast Ale, they've come a very long way on their sustainability packaging journey. They've tracked down the most efficient packaging that fulfills its purpose whilst minimising emissions over its entire lifetime. It's interesting because, as she points out, although the primary production of glass is much less carbon intensive than aluminium, which requires significantly more energy during production and the mining of bauxite, when you measure the impacts of recycled cans versus recycled bottles, the cans fare increasingly better with each turn around the recycling circle. On top of this, the heavier bottles cause increased transport and distribution emissions in each loop of their circular journey. And so the lighter packaging, when recycled enough times, not only reduces the embodied emissions within its materials, but also reduces the transportation emissions. Louisa talked about Toast Ale's growlers. Reuse is always better environmentally and has a smaller carbon footprint than recycling, and companies should consider offering their customers refillable options or a return scheme, which can be a challenging project to put in place, but can drastically cut emissions. We recently conducted a study, actually, for a drinks company comparing the carbon emissions from a bottle return scheme that they were running with simply recycling. And the results showed that reusing once saved around 18% of emissions, but that increased to 36% of emissions when reusing 15 times, which is the average number of times a bottle is reused in the UK. Although glass can be reused an infinite number of times, as she points out, aluminium can as well. And there are other actions you can do, such as reducing the weight of the glass in each bottle, although that is a fine balancing act because you've got to have the minimum strength required. And of course, sourcing your bottles with a high percentage of recycled content. So all in all, packaging has a huge part to play in our lives, and especially in the food and beverage industry. Improvements in sustainable packaging, removing packaging altogether where possible, and replacing plastic wherever possible is a challenge that many in the industry are determined to just persevere with, really.
So, once you've packaged your products, you've obviously got to distribute them to their points of sale. And you may have to travel to key meetings to generate sales. Travel and transport is something Toast Ale have thought about too.
Other areas have included looking at our travel footprint. We previously had relatively few journeys travelled internationally because we don't export our beer. We decided right at the beginning that it did not make sense from an environmental perspective to be moving heavy containers of liquid all around the world when there are breweries and great ingredients and beer drinkers, all over the world. So instead, we set up a collaboration model working with others. But we did used to travel to meet some of those key partners, and our flight footprint actually was relatively significant for relatively few journeys that I guess we wouldn't have really anticipated if we hadn't done that analysis. We then decided that we would move away from the international travel. Of course, COVID and the lockdown made that decision very easy for us, but I think that has also helped the expectations of others that you travel to them. So we're very confident that we will maintain that commitment going forward.
I think what Toast Ale have done here is really, really clever. Instead of shipping their product, which is also another financial cost to a business, they've created partnerships with other breweries in other countries to reduce their travel footprint. Emma, how else could a food and beverage business reduce its transport and distribution footprint?
Yes, great question. Transport and distribution is really, really big for us at the moment, and working with not just food and beverage, but obviously e-com companies in the sort of wake of COVID, or perhaps it's still going on. There are so many more online food and drink and online other things as well. So e-com is huge. And some of the things that people are doing are working to look at which transport and distribution freight providers have got a lower carbon emission intensity per kilometre, and they will collaborate with those suppliers, and they'll say, okay, so how can we help you on your journey to decarbonise your fleet? They will look at transporting by sea rather than air, and they will engage with their customers to explain why they might have to wait longer for their products. They will look at also transporting, interestingly, by rail, and that's obviously quite challenging because a lot of freight doesn't go by rail so much anymore. But hauliers are working with food and drink companies to look at how to shift that. In the heavy goods vehicles industry, they will collaborate with suppliers to look at how they can move perhaps to hydrogen. With the smaller, what they call the last mile, they'll look at decarbonising their fleet through taking advantage of government grants or bursaries, etc., to be able to install electric vehicle charging points. And this is how people are tackling this. So it's a sort of a multifactorial kind of challenge, really.
Okay, now let's get to the heart of Toast Ale's business. The process of actually brewing the beer. As we heard earlier, beer brewing is one of the most emissions-intensive industries in the world. How does Toast Ale tackle that one?
The other area that I'm working on now is looking at our brewery-based emissions. So we contract brew, we don't own our own facilities, and we did that because there are breweries that exist with spare capacity all around the country. We didn't want to create an additional land footprint and an additional capital footprint from buying the kit that we wouldn't be using all of the time when there is already slack in the system. So we work with existing breweries and use their facilities. We have our own brewer in-house who looks after our recipe development, quality assurance, and the brew process itself. But the ownership, and so the ownership of those emissions as well, strictly sits with our partner breweries. Now it's very important that we work with them to understand how we can address emissions associated with heating, particularly where we're warming the liquid, the water, the liquor that is used to produce the beer, and then to maintain the temperature throughout the brew process, and also the CO2 that's released during fermentation. About 10% of our emissions last year was CO2 released directly from the tanks during fermentation. So I want to look at how we can capture that CO2 and can we use that in the carbonation of the beer itself, looking at some other breweries that have already done that, and technologies that do already exist there. But how do we work with our partners to make sure that we can take advantage of those when we ultimately don't have the final say? There's a lot of work that needs to be done still. We have made this commitment to be net zero by 2030, and we have a roadmap to achieve that. But a lot of work still to be done, and lots of partners, both from our supply chain and our customers, that we need to work with collaboratively to achieve those reductions.
Brewing is a carbon-intensive process, and Toast Ale, as you've heard, have done a lot of innovative things to reduce their emissions. Louisa mentioned it is now possible to capture and repurpose CO2 to brew beer. Emma, could you expand on this a bit more, please?
Yes, thanks, Will. The yeast that's used to ferment beer breaks down the malt sugar and converts it to alcohol and carbon dioxide, which, instead of being released, is then captured through a kind of piping system, which then converts it to a liquid, and it's stored in a box, a bit like a large fridge. And although it hasn't been really accessible to smaller breweries, recent developments have made this easier. So that's great progress. And the carbon dioxide that they capture is then actually fed back into the system because it's used to carbonate the beer, which is amazing. And especially in the light of, when we had carbon dioxide shortages in the UK and in other places across Europe, the fact that they're becoming more autonomous and less reliant on external sources of carbon dioxide also makes this a rather sort of beautiful kind of circular system.
What Toast Ale have done is brilliant, and when it comes to measuring their success, they've adopted a simple, effective, and quite frankly, ingenious method.
To measure our success, we have a very simple KPI, a key performance indicator, which is based on the amount of bread that we've been able to rescue to prevent going to waste. So we measure the number of slices, and by the end of 2020 we'd brewed with over 2 million slices of bread, which when you stack up, that reaches approximately the 3 times the height of Everest. So it's a significant amount of bread that we're able to prevent being wasted, and yet it's relatively small in the scale of how much we waste as a country and globally. Overall, globally, we waste about a third of all the food that we produce, and certainly in the UK, bread tops that list. We waste about 44% of all of the bread that is produced in the UK. So we've reduced that significantly, but not significantly enough. And our approach, therefore, is to look at how we can influence other breweries to be circular, to use surplus bread as part of their processes, and support them on that journey. There are challenges with brewing in a circular way to do with sourcing good quality sources of surplus ingredients, whether that's bread or other ingredients that many businesses use within the circular economy, how to process, if needed, those ingredients, and then how to adapt any systems and processes you already have within the business to be able to use those. So we open source a recipe that anybody can access via our website, that homebrewers can use, that small breweries can use, and bigger breweries can collaborate directly with us so that we can provide more hands-on advice. And we also try to measure the impact that we are having through those collaborations. So we're not taking full credit for what other breweries are doing, but we are internally measuring the impact that they're having as a result of the work that we're doing. All of those slices of bread saved, we can also translate into the carbon emissions that have been avoided, both by preventing that bread from ending up in landfill, but also by reducing the amount of barley that is needed to be used as well. Barley has quite a significant carbon footprint because of the malting process that requires a lot of heat and water. We can measure the amount of water that we have saved and also the amount of land that is not needed to grow that barley that would have otherwise been used. So those are our key environmental measures of success. So this is a toast lager. It's brewed with approximately 1 slice of surplus bread per can. This is actually our low alcohol lager that we have here. It's part of a series called Rise Up, where we've partnered with B Corp businesses to raise awareness about the impact of the food system on different elements of our ecology. This one is about our oceans and is a collaboration that we have done with Tea Pigs. What is making this different, I think, from what most other breweries are doing is that not only do we have a circular approach to the process, so we're using surplus bread within our beer. With others within the series, we've used other ingredients as well. So, for example, we have a mango IPA that was brewed with Oddbox and Flawsome drinks, both B Corps. Those mangoes were surplus to requirements because the demands from the supermarkets do not always marry up with the production at the farm level. Farmers are having to produce more to ensure that they will meet the orders that they receive from supermarkets. And of course, crops can be unpredictable. So it's really important that they are able to fulfill those orders, but it often leaves them with surplus that they maybe don't have a route to market for. So there are businesses like Oddbox and Flawsome who take those ingredients, produce like incredible drinks on the behalf of Flawsome or veg box schemes as Oddbox do. So working with other businesses, and I think that is one of the key differences for Toast, that we are very, very collaborative as a business, that we're seeking to demonstrate that you can be part of a movement of businesses that are wanting to achieve change. You can do your bit by simply enjoying a pint, but also the profits from the sale of these drinks go to charities that are working to fix the food system. So our main charity partner is called Feedback. They campaign for changes to industry practice at government level. They were the organisation that brought to the forefront the idea of wonky fruit.
Food waste, as we know, results in a huge amount of carbon emissions needlessly being released into the atmosphere. I say needlessly because, as Louisa has just pointed out, produce that was previously too ugly, in excess, or not the right size would be wasted. But now, new organisations are seeing the economic opportunity and capitalising on this. Emma, what do you think about this? How big an impact is made on the environment when surplus produce that is otherwise destined to go to the bin is instead repurposed into a product?
As you might imagine, it's a massive impact. Toast Ale are a prime example of success in this space because they've built a business which is creating a product that's made from other businesses' surplus produce. For them, it's bread. And I think this is sort of an example of the circular economy in action. Louisa mentioned Oddbox, who use unwanted odd fruit and vegetables to fill their boxes and deliver to customers. The impacts of growing fruit and vegetables are high. And so So therefore, taking this waste fruit and veg, or in the case of toast ale, waste bread, putting it back into the food system enormously reduces carbon emissions, not to mention other impacts, other environmental impacts. And so, yeah, for toast ale, production's taken second place behind packaging in the most carbon intensive part of their supply chain. However, when we've conducted studies for food companies, by far the biggest component of their carbon footprint has been food production. So reducing food and drink waste, or reusing it and putting it back into the food system, can slash emissions.
Of course, so growing produce for the food and beverage industry has a significant impact on the environment. Here's Louisa again.
One of the surprising discoveries I made on my sustainability journey was the importance of our soils. I have known for a long time that we need to reduce our emissions, and I've been very sceptical about offsetting. I don't believe in purchasing carbon credits to, in theory, negate the emissions that we're releasing to the atmosphere. I've always wanted to look at reduction. I've been very interested in nature-based solutions, looking at primarily the protection of ancient forests that do such an incredible job in terms of drawing down carbon, but also they're vitally important for biodiversity and for Indigenous peoples. But it was through a collaboration with Rebel Kitchen as part of our Rise Up series, looking at the impact of agriculture on our soils and understanding the damage that we are doing to the soils just by the way we produce our food, that really shocked me. Seeing the difference between a farm that has been industrially farmed and a farm that is farmed regeneratively and or organically is really quite eye-opening when you see the difference in the soil structure, the difference in the results in terms of water retention, the difference in that even in the quality in terms of nutrients of the food that's coming out of the land. And meeting farmers who are on this regenerative journey, who've seen the direct results for themselves in terms of the positive results of working with nature and not against it. I think it was just an area for me that I had not, and I guess not many people don't really think about the vital role that our soils play for us in producing our food. And yeah, I'm really excited about this now as an area that I want to support as a business. We are working with a company called Soil Heroes, who are supporting that regenerative journey for many farmers. We're working directly with 2 farms in the UK to support them. Instead of offsetting, we're investing in those farms with farmers to help them to do things like plant wildflower meadows that attract pollinators. They are doing minimum or no, preferably tillage that stops the breakup of the soils and so protects the soil structure. They're planting cover crops all year round and also a mix of crops on the land in a rotation. I think it's just really fantastic that the work that they're doing. But also it's going to be critical for us as a business. We're reliant on an agricultural product, primarily barley, but also wheat in the form of the bread that we're using. And so it's only right, I feel, for us to be investing in the very people and the very land that is producing those vital ingredients for us. So yeah, I'm very excited about soil, and it's been quite a recent discovery.
Louisa has touched upon so many aspects of soil regeneration. It's hard to draw out the most important. The key thing Louisa highlights is that the good soil quality is essential for businesses in the food and beverage industry to succeed. More importantly, it's essential for us as a species to survive, and therefore we must change the way we farm, since conventional methods are damaging the soil quality. Emma, what are the consequences of soil degradation?
A third of the world's soil is either highly or moderately degraded, and that is actually having disastrous effects around the world, creating things like landslides, floods, pollution, desertification, biodiversity loss, but also a huge decline in global food production because of reduced productivity. And this is threatening food security, future food security. Soil is one of the most important natural carbon sinks. And when it's degraded through overuse of tilling, fertilizers and pesticides, monocropping, and being left exposed when fallow, the carbon in soil is released faster, and this leads to a vicious circle of further carbon loss, reducing its ability to sequester atmospheric carbon. But then soil degradation isn't just about carbon. Soil is full of millions of living organisms that interact with one another. So it's full of bacteria. They have a major influence on the formation, structure, and productivity of the soil. A teaspoon of healthy soil contains more organisms than there are humans living on Earth. Intensive farming practices break up the soil structure through extra tilling and all sorts of other processes, which leads to reduction in the soil organisms which help plants to thrive. These soil biota are vital for plant growth and health. And so regenerative agriculture increases soil organic matter, and that increases the biota diversity and also the above ground biodiversity. It increases water retention, it increases the fertility of the soil, ecosystem resilience, nutrients in the food that's grown in it. So regenerative agriculture reverses the human-caused soil degradation paradigm, which we've kind of constructed.
How important for climate change are these methods for food production?
Food production is massive, actually. We've mentioned methods of crop growing and seen how removing pesticides and fertilizers, reducing tilling, intercropping, cover crops all decrease the sort of net emissions of producing plant foods. So for plant-based food and beverages, production methods can make a huge difference for climate change. However, when you look at animal-derived foods, the same isn't true, because although organic and regenerative farming can be much better for soil health and for the animals themselves while they're alive, counterintuitively, in a way, expansive farming of animals is worse for the planet than intensive farming, across a range of environmental indicators that you can look at. The emissions for production of meat is the elephant in the room, really. The highly inefficient transfer of energy from plant to animal increases the carbon footprint of meat and cheese compared with eating plants. Animal agriculture produces around 51% of all global emissions, whereas all methods of transportation combined only account for 13%, which puts it in proportion. So meat has by far the highest carbon footprint per kilogram of protein. A lamb's protein has 100 times the global warming potential of protein from nuts, for example. So for the food industry, the elephant in the room is that shifting away from meat and dairy is crucial if companies want to be part of a sustainable future in which the whole world can be fed.
Back to Toast Ale and a glimpse into the future. What's next?
There is always more that we can do as a business ourselves. We are limited somewhat by our capacity. We are a team of 4 employees and 2 contractors, so we have 6 people altogether working on Toast. For some bigger companies that have smaller suppliers, they can put the weight of their own business and to push those suppliers to make the changes themselves. We are smaller than most of our suppliers, so that makes that really challenging. And our approach has therefore been to be open, transparent, engaging, positive, to try to bring others on the journey with us and inspire other organisations to be part of what we're trying to achieve. And we're definitely seeing the whole industry having moved, the whole country seems to have changed over the past year in terms of awareness of climate change and loss of nature. So we're definitely seeing improvement.
Toast Ale's environmental achievements are truly inspiring. But it's not just us that think so.
And the ultimate accolade from our business perspective is the Queen's Award for Enterprise for Sustainable Development that we won last year. We are incredibly proud to receive that award. There are very few businesses that do. And I think it really recognises the work that we're doing, not just about making ourselves sustainable, but about trying to share our experience with others and trying to bring along others on that journey as well. We're about being an open and joyous movement, and not just a sustainable business.
Congratulations, Louisa, and to the rest of the team at Toast Ale. That's an incredible award and very well deserved. And thank you for joining us for this important episode of Target 1.5. If you'd like to ask Louisa a question or share your thoughts about the topics we have discussed today, please join us for a post-podcast discussion at sustainabilitysolved.org. Don't forget to check out our other episodes in this mini-series on law and finance. And don't miss the next one, when we get our guests back for a roundtable discussion. They'll be talking about the critical lessons they've learned and how they apply to other industries. That's next on Target 1.5. So you really enjoy sustainability and want to be a part of the solution. Come and join our vibrant community now. Book a call and we can talk more.